Hey friends, it's Father Jay here for your Tuesday update. I am standing in front of the western wall of Calvary Church with the bell tower to the side here and surrounded by the Calvary churchyard out in front of me. And I can stand here and see the work that is happening here as we take up the old asphalt in preparation for repaving all of these roads. This is a project that's part of our capital improvement program. That program is made possible by our partnership with Ingalls and their use of the property across the street. And so we are grateful to be able to do that and to be able to put the resources of our parish, the pledges and so forth, into the work of the programs of the church and take care of some of these capital expenses with other resources. It's also kind of a daunting prospect because, especially in this area down on the lower part of the churchyard, many of you know that area has been problematic for years with potholes and water collecting and so forth. And so as we take that up and begin to try to repair all of that, we have no idea what we're going to find underneath there. We have no idea what we're going to find that will need to be repaired and redone in the work of that process. But we know that we have been through work before. We have been through times of digging up and exploring and facing challenges. The wall behind me, in fact, is a strong symbol of that. This wall and the bell tower are the only two things that survived, only two parts of the structure that survive from the original church building that was built in 1859. The entire building burned to the ground in 1935, leaving only the bell tower and pieces of this wall. And the parish salvaged what bricks they could to rebuild this wall and build it larger and build it wider so that this church could contain more people. And so part of our story is the story of having survived times of tribulation, times of literal fire, and having come through in a place that is in many ways stronger and more resilient because of it. Another part of that story too is the fact that these bricks were fired on this site. The bricks in this wall and in this bell tower were fired on this site in the late 1850s by enslaved people. They were made by people who were enslaved to the families who built Calvary Church, who founded Calvary Church. And so the work of their hands, whether they willingly contributed it or not, the work of their hands is part of the story of these bricks as well. And prior to this epidemic, Calvary had started to dig into some of those stories. Again, a daunting prospect because as we dig into them, we don't know what we're going to find underneath all of the time. And we might find some uncomfortable truths. But we had begun to dig into those stories, to the stories of the founding of this place, to the stories of the Civil War that happened here. And our intention has been to continue to look into those stories, to look into the stories of the monuments on this place, and our hopeful acts of reconciliation and attempts at reconciliation, and the ongoing work that we might be called to do in that regard. And we enter into those places, into those stories, through places like this, through buildings like this, and through the stories of our faith in Scripture. And these are powerful portals. These are powerful symbols of our faith and how we come to gather together. But they are only powerful in the sense and to the extent to which we are willing to enter into those stories, that we are willing to make the stories of our past the stories of ourselves. To the extent to which we are willing to own all of this building, its legacy of resilience and its legacy of slavery. To the extent to which we are willing to own the stories of the faithful people who for generation after generation have come to pray in this place. To the extent that which we are willing to enter into the story of Solomon when he dedicated the temple in Jerusalem. And I read that story from this Bible, which was given to me symbolically as a gift at my installation as your rector, but was given to me originally, it says, September 13th, 1981. And it's signed by Ned Beckus, who was the minister of the First Presbyterian Church in Franklin, Tennessee at that time, and Marty Sutherland, who was the Christian education director at that church at that time. And they gave me a version of the Bible that is the Revised Standard Version. There is a reason why we have a new Revised Standard Version, because some of this language can be stilted or a little awkward, can get in the way of our entering into the story of God. But I invite you to consider these words that Solomon prayed as he sought to enter into the story of God at the dedication of the first temple in Jerusalem. And he said, "But will God dwell indeed with man on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain thee. How much less this house which I have built? Yet have regard to the prayer of thy servant and to his supplication, O my Lord, hearkening to the cry and to the prayer which thy servant prays before thee, that thy eyes may be open day and night towards this house, the place where thou hast promised to set thy name, that thou mayest hearken to the prayer which thy servant offers toward this place. And hearken thou to the supplications of thy servants and of thy people Israel, when they pray towards this place. Yea, hear thou from heaven thy dwelling place, and when thou hearest, forgive." Solomon knew that God's house needed to be a place of prayer and a place of supplication, a place where we could go to ask forgiveness from God. Ask forgiveness for those things that we discover as we seek to repair the paths on which we have walked. Seek those things that we discover as we learned the history of the places in which we dwell. Seek forgiveness for those things that we discover in ourselves as we are faced with challenges and sometimes don't live up to them in the ways that we would have liked. We come to this place and we enter into this story to ask for God's forgiveness, to ask for God's blessing, and to experience the hope that God's promise brings to us. God's promise of forgiveness, God's promise of justice, and God's promise of peace. I hope that you will join me in the days and weeks and months ahead as we continue to dig into our stories, as we continue to live into new stories, and as we continue to walk in the paths which God has prepared for us since the beginning. And in these days, may God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.